Welcome to partialarc.com. Don't do that.
I'm here to save the day. I'm here to save the day.
Soon I will be invincible. Because comics. Welcome to Because Comics. This is episode 24. I'm your host, Jay Jones, and I'm joined by my co-host, the Star-Spangled Mike Christensen.
Dun, da, 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 da.
Mike, my God, that outfit is very bright.
Yes, it is, Jay.
Did you steal that from the set of Avengers?
I'd rather not say.
Look, if Chris Evans is going to break in here and start beating both of us, I am going to need pictures, because that is something to go online.
Well, then maybe that shouldn't happen. Maybe then let's don't put it on our podcast that I definitely have his outfit from Avengers 2.
Are you sure, Mike? Because I feel like I need to promote it as much as possible so that this does happen.
Okay, but if we're going to do that, let me then take off the Winter Soldier outfit underneath, because it gets very warm.
That's going to be really embarrassing.
And underneath that, I have the Avengers outfit.
And then you have the Scarlet Witch outfit under that as well.
Scarlet Witch?
Yeah, you know, that nice jacket that she wears. That's a thing, right? I guess it's not necessarily an outfit as it is
I'm
just
not wearing any Scarlet Witch outfit. What are you two? How did you...
Sorry, the Black Widow outfit. I keep forgetting.
How did you know? I'm wearing an article of clothing of every Avenger. Let me just put that out there right now.
When Mike goes sees the Avengers, he just does the whole thing. Some people pick one costume. Mike is committed to all of it.
That's true, because I can't just pick one Avenger.
It's just how we do things here on Fashion Because Comics. Guys, each episode we talk about our pulls on our pull list. I'll kick things off with an extremely weird comic called Nameless, written by Grant Morrison, drawn by Chris Burnham. And Grant Morrison is a very interesting individual and writes some very fun, crazy comics. I've already talked about some of his stuff. I talked about, for example, when we had our one where we did a throwback to ones that we previously liked, I talked about Joe the Barbarian. While this time Nameless kind of takes his, his crazy ideas that he has sometimes and just really throws it out there.
Yeah.
So Nameless, as of this recording, I've only read one issue. The second issue will be out by now. But Nameless is essentially, it's a story about a man who is like a dream thief, maybe a lucid dream thief, who is recruited by a bunch of billionaires to go into space to stop an asteroid from hitting Earth. That is what I've gathered, the premise of this story.
I feel like I just listened to every episode of Blockbuster Punch-Up at once.
Like, all at once, so just squeezed into your brain. Like, I had to reread this comic.
It's Grant Morrison.
Grant Morrison.
It's more often than not, that's something that has to happen, just to get all the references.
And I mean, like, there's some really cool stuff at play in here. I mean, the premise is pretty out there, and by the end of the comic, the reason why this dream guy going to an asteroid like this starts to make sense. Mm-hmm. So I'll let you guys kind of figure that out when you read it, because the first time I was like, why is this guy involved? What does any of this connect to the other? I talked about on another podcast, on Blockbuster Punch-Up, on how I kind of, not loathed, but I wish that they'd taken a little bit more of advantage of like dreaming in the movie Inception.
Right.
And this comic looks to be kind of taking full advantage of like what, like, maybe not dream thievery, but dream navigating would look like.
Right.
And how absolutely bat crazy nuts it would be. And with the art by Chris, I mean, it's really fun. It's really weird and out there. Mike, I believe, like offhand, I showed you an image from one part of the comic that just didn't really make any sense.
Yeah.
Probably mostly for you because you didn't see anything else, but it really doesn't make much else sense in the rest of the issue itself. So Nameless is actually also the name of the main character. He actually is called Nameless because he has taken no name. Apparently it gives you maybe some powers in the dream world. I don't know. We'll find out. But there's a lot of cool stuff going on. Maybe weird space stuff, an asteroid. You guys figure it out. And check out Nameless, Grant Morrison, Chris Burnham. So that's my pull. Mike, what is your pull for this episode?
Mine is a comic from DC called Gotham Academy.
Ooh.
Now, I don't know if you've read any of Gotham Academy.
I have paged through a little bit of Gotham Academy, but I'm not as far as you.
Yeah, because I've read the first 4 or 5 issues at this point, and it's just delightful.
It is a delightful comic.
Gotham Academy is a boarding school comic that takes place in Gotham City. So it is basically, you know how like Hogwarts is like the land of fantasy, and like, wouldn't it be great if magic?
I feel like Gotham got like the short end of that stick.
But here's the thing, they're not teaching magic.
Right.
It's just a normal school.
They're also not teaching how to make fear gas and freeze people with ice guns.
Right, but it is set in Gotham for a reason. Because of just like Gotham Central, where Brubaker and Rucka basically came in and said, this is the stories of the Gotham Police Departments and how weird it is just to live in the world of Gotham.
Which is a great run.
It is. It's fantastic. This is a comic that's like, what is it like to go to school in Gotham? and have like school in a really old building.
Right.
Like Arkham has so much weird, bizarre history, and Wayne Manor has so much weird, bizarre history, and like probably, I don't know, the commissioner's office, maybe? I don't know.
I'm sure.
The town hall, there's weird
The
old
nursery,
stuff.
everything in Gotham is weird and old.
The bridges, we know from Gates of Gotham by Scott Snyder that everything in Gotham is weird and old and crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that's the premise of Gotham. And Gotham Academy is that, but it's also just boarding school drama with teenagers. And it's delightful. It's just so much fun because you have this character who has this tie to Batman. We don't, fully understand what it is right
We don't
away.
really know what it is yet.
We just know that...
Because I remember they referenced it early in the first issue.
They reference it early on that there's something that she's had some sort of interaction with Batman. And it somehow relates to her, like, last summer. Or, like, something she's basically changed in the last, like, since the last school year. And whatever it is, Batman was there for it.
Had a big part of it or something
Somehow
like that.
played a role. And that's what it would be like to be in Gotham. And you, like, look out the window and you're like, oh, look, the bat signal is a thing that we see sometimes. It's just this weird thing of, like, when they talk about hauntings, part of your mind is like, yeah, hauntings are a thing. In the DC universe, that's totally a thing.
There's a comic I've talked about on this podcast called Gotham at Midnight, or
Yeah.
Gotham by Midnight, and that's quite literally about hauntings that go on in Gotham.
But it's also a boarding school, so it's like, oh, okay, it's just kids, or they're playing pranks, or they're just up night, they're away from home, and they're overreacting. And part of it is like, or is there a supervillain? Because, like, that's certainly a possibility.
It's
Like-
Gotham, like, there's a lot of them in Gotham.
And here's another cool thing. There are a lot of references to the 60s live-action TV show of Batman.
Really?
Several of the professors are old 60s supervillains.
Oh my god, that's
So
great.
Bookworm is the librarian.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, and Aunt Harriet, who was the weird matronly figure that had to live in the Wayne Manor so that you could just be aware, like, oh, there's no hanky-panky going on. Like,
oh, right. That was a thing.
Aunt
She
Harriet-
was basically like the Mrs. Hudson for, like, the Sherlock business in Batman.
Aunt Harriet, she is one of the teachers at the school.
That's pretty
She's
great.
one of the, like, counselors or whatever it is, basically the people
So the creators are like, wink, wink. Remember these
It's
guys?
so great because there's so much, like, there's some deep cuts in there. And just, like, honestly, the main characters are so delightful. So the main character's name is Olive Silverlock.
Okay.
She's the one who's had the rough experience or some sort of
Does
experience.
she have silver locks, Mike? She does, I know.
Yeah, she has silver hair, Her best friend, or her sort of, not best friend, but her sort of sidekick character in the first issue and going forward is a girl called Maps, and she's just way into D&D. Like,
That's awesome.
100%. Like, she draws beholders in art class.
Really?
Yeah.
Why don't I remember any of this when I first read it?
I don't think you've read that far in yet.
I probably haven't.
Because she's just deep into it, and she's the writer's love
I
of
think I'm
D&D.
contractually obligated by my life to read anything that has the word Gotham or Batman in it, so I probably read the first issue, and there was just so many other Batman spin-off comics I couldn't get back to.
The writers are Becky Cloonan and Brendan Fletcher, and the pencils are by Karl Kerschl, and they are just, like, putting all of their love of fun and, like, teen hijinks and everything that they just enjoy. They enjoy
love teen hijinks.
They enjoy the 60s show, and they enjoy, D&D, and they enjoy weird, like, supernatural, like, who'sums and what's-its in the closets and
I
things.
didn't think about that at all, but, like, Gotham being like a dungeon and, like, a D&D or, like, a role-playing game. Because
Especially
it has a lot of those things that it would make that.
Especially a school. Like,
Yeah, an old school would work really well.
and it's just a really fun book that I'm just loving.
And I'm sure people, like, growing up, depending on, like, where you went to school, unless it was newly built, like, it's like, this place is old, like, what do you think is down in the kitchen? Where do you think the teachers go at this time?
Yeah, there's a graveyard on campus.
Of course there's a graveyard on campus.
And, like, I don't know, I didn't go to a private school, so, like, maybe, but, like, whether or not there are, I think there are to some
There are
schools.
graveyards on every private campus. Yes,
No,
that's
like,
what Mike was trying to get to.
Especially if a private school is attached to, like, a church or something, then yes, definitely there'd be a graveyard because that's, services would be performed. Like, I don't know how many of them have it, but, like, I have no trouble believing that in Gotham, of course there's a graveyard.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't there be?
Almost at every school.
So, guys, I'm just loving Gotham Academy. It's just delightful.
All right, guys. Well, that was our pulls from our pull list, and that'll take us right into our main segment. Mike, do that thing.
The Incredibles. Family Matters. Guys, The Incredibles is the best superhero film ever made.
I really have a hard time disagreeing with you because it is so good.
It's so great, and it captures the feel of comics in a real way that most movie adaptations can't and shouldn't. You know, you're doing a live action Captain America movie. I don't really want to see his ears sticking out through his mask. I don't really want to see the wings sticking off the side. Like, it's live action. I could do without. But if it's an animated movie, like, I want the spirit and the feel. I want the James Bond supervillain layers, and I want the just costumes and all the things. The movie gets it all right.
Did you have a moment when you were like, oh, this is exactly what I want it to be? Because I do.
I don't think I was into comics yet when I first saw the movie.
Oh, really?
I think I had read comics. I knew comics. But when it came out in 2000...
And yes, guys, I guess there was a time when Mike was just not into comics.
I had read some Spider-Man comics at that point, sort of sporadically in the 90s. But I didn't really get into... I'd read some Ultimate Spider-Man, but I'd taken a lapse. I read the first, 2 hardcovers.
Okay.
And then I really...
That's so weird. That is a good entry point, actually, I feel like.
And then I got into it again kind of around the time of Civil War and that sort of thing, which was 2006. Mm-hmm. So 2004, I knew superheroes. And I knew, a lot of stuff.
You knew the feeling of, this is that feel of superhero.
But now more than ever, more as I got into comics, more and more...
Go back and revisit it, and it just has it all.
It's just so great.
You know what I knew? When the guy came out dressed in a mime outfit, and his name was Bon Voyage, I knew immediately, this is my kind of movie.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And of course, they did comic books. Of course they did.
Of course they did.
This one came out in 2009. This is a 4-part miniseries called Family Matters.
All right.
Published through Boom. Written by Mark Waid.
What?
Mark Waid, one of our favorite writers.
I love Mark Waid.
Superman Birthright and Daredevil, God. And that's just the recent stuff. He's a legend. Fantastic Four.
Actually, really, when you put those just 2 back to back, I mean, Superman Birthright's probably my favorite Superman origin story.
Yeah.
And, I mean, his run on Daredevil, I mean, there probably isn't a more consistent comic that you'll find over 2 years than Mark Waid's Daredevil run. I mean, anybody listening to this, we haven't talked about it as a pull because, again, it's something I just feel like we don't need to at this point.
Yeah, Daredevil. You're reading it or you're not.
Pick up Daredevil, Mark Waid. It's just the best.
Yeah, but this is Mark Waid writing superheroes of The Incredibles.
Yeah.
It's great. And it's art by Marcio Takara. And the first issue opens with a robot from the future named Futurion.
Perfect.
And Futurion is spelled Futur10N.
That is delightful.
He shows up at the Metroville Zoo and uses his future science, basically, his devolution bombs, to turn the animals into dinosaurs.
Okay.
So you have a T-Rex with a hippo head and a brontosaurus with elephant ears and tusks at the base of its neck.
Perfect.
And monkeys with pterodactyl wings and a bear velociraptor.
I love how this comic's just decided, yes, pterodactyls turn into monkeys. It's totally what happened.
Yeah, it just devolves them all to dinosaurs. Sure. Okay.
Wait, didn't Super Mario Brothers the movie have a weapon like this?
I don't know. I don't remember that movie.
Okay, never mind.
But the Incredibles are there because, that's how comics work.
Yeah, they show up.
And, no, they're already there.
Oh, okay. Even more comic-y.
So they suit up and they charge into battle, but they're still kind of getting the hang of getting in sync in battle. So Dash charges in without a plan. If you guys don't know the movie, pause, go watch The Incredibles, come back.
Yeah, please.
Wasn't that great?
Pause to the center. Did you just have the best time?
It's the best movie.
That scene with Dash in the water, so great, am I right?
It's one of my favorite scenes in movies.
Oh, yeah.
But they're still kind of getting a handle on being a team. Dash charges into battle without a plan. Helen sidelines Violet with babysitting duty. She basically says, keep Jack out of harm's way. And just Violet doesn't want to be sidelined.
Right.
But Bob charges in to hit Futurion. And when he punches Futurion, he hurts his hand. And Futurion goes, normally that would have taken off my head. Weird. And
so that wasn't him
it seems like it, but then he's ordinarily that would have taken off my head, and then smacks Bob away. Violet and Helen managed to pin down Futurion underneath a brontosaurus elephant.
Of course.
And Bob says that we're due for a family meeting. We gotta sort of sit down and talk. But then when they pull Futurion out from under the brontophants, he kind of has to strain himself to lift it up. Bob has a little bit of trouble keeping the thing up off the ground.
Oh no, he's Spider-Man 2ing.
Helen's a little concerned that Bob's not himself. He seems to be under the weather. But Bob can't get sick? That's not a thing?
Right.
So, is it
it's just... Unbreakable.
Is it just stress? What is kind of the deal there? Unbreakable, another fantastic superhero movie.
Yeah, we were firing on all cylinders today.
So they're trying to figure out, and just then the Parr's neighbors stop by. They kind of forgot that, oh yeah, Jim and Jill were coming by. Forgot about that. Fortunately, they're not in costume anymore.
Right, but that would be awkward.
Jim's just this really great guy. Jim, gets Bob tickets to a sports game, and they got like box seats. Like he and Bob get along really well.
That's a nice dude.
Jill like keeps bringing over baked goods for the whole family. Of course, Bob eats them all himself. Like no one else sees any ever.
Wait, you've brought over baked goods before? I've brought over many baked goods. It's like,
No, it's more like, oh yeah, maybe you'll save some this time. I saved some last time. No, honey, that's not what happened.
you never do that.
There's a scene in the Incredibles movie where he like literally is like sneaking in, picks up a whole cake and just puts it in his mouth.
Oh, I do remember that scene.
Just like in one shot.
That movie's delightful.
They have 2 kids, Jim and Jill. Xander, a moody teenager who's always wearing a hoodie, and he's got a crush on Violet.
I mean, you're required as a teenager to wear a hoodie about 90% of the time.
And then Bart, who's this hyperactive kid who almost matches pace with Dash, except, like, no, he doesn't.
Yeah,
But, like,
right.
you know, Dash is slowing down enough that they're keeping up with each other.
He puts in an effort.
And at one point, they're playing in the backyard, and they're both dressed as Woody and Buzz.
Oh, that's pretty nice.
It's pretty nice. It's a nice little wink. Dash is inside watching TV because, of course, suddenly he's inside and watching TV. Like, of course he is.
His attention span is as fast as you can think.
Yeah, and he sees footage of Futurion being taken into custody, and he points out to Bob that his eyes flashed for a fraction of a second. And he has to, like, slow it down, like, 3 times. And, like, see?
Bob's
See?
eyes or Futurion's?
Futurion's eyes.
Oh.
And which Bob knows, that's the signal Futurion uses to activate his devolution bombs. But we rounded up all the bombs. Didn't we? And then he, sneaks into the zoo that night looking for one more bomb. He finds one bomb next to the sleeping lions.
Oh, great.
And he's just like, okay, cool, I'll just take care of this. And it starts beeping, and the lions are awake, and he's running, and he's trying to, he tries to pull open the bars to get out of the zoo, but then Frozone comes in and just freezes the lions and freezes the bomb. He's like, hey, what's up, buddy? And Bob shows him that the bars didn't move. They have knuckle imprints. They have imprints from his fingers, but that's it. He's losing his powers.
No, sad.
Issue 2 opens with Bob in his kitchen struggling to open a jar of pickles.
Okay, wow, that went quickly.
Yeah, and it's the same night. Frozone is like, okay, this is severe.
Right.
This is a problem. He manages to get it open.
Oh no.
And they're talking, and Bob says the kids don't know yet. The Helen doesn't know yet. He first noticed the problem about 2 weeks earlier when he barely stopped the train from colliding with the station, and every day since, it's been getting weaker. Frozone asks, have you breathed in any poison tranquil gas? No, that just makes me sneeze. Have you been hit by chronolightning? No, that just tickles. Like, it's so great.
Chronolightning.
He's never felt anything like this. And Helen comes in and turns on the lights. Never felt anything like what? Never felt anything like how cool it is to have a friend like Jim, a non-hero pal. Like, he's a bad liar because it's a superhero comic, and that's how it works.
And that's how dads are in superhero comics.
She obviously sees the de-evolution bomb and is like, I don't want that in my house. He's like, okay, I'll put it in the trophy room. Helen offers Frozone some cake, but Bob didn't leave any there either. Bob's eating his feelings now, I think.
Yeah, I feel like he's got some good reasons behind it.
And Frozone leaves and says, Bob, you gotta bite the bullet, you gotta do what you don't want to do. You have to go see your doctor. Superheroes have a doctor.
Is it Night Nurse?
No, it's Doc Sunbright.
What?
We'll come back to him in just a second. Real quick side note, Violet stays up almost all night chatting with Xander, who always just replies with, guess so. Like, did you have a good time today? Guess so. So, see you tomorrow? Guess so. And she's super excited because she's so 14 years old. She's like, guess so! He said guess so!
That's awesome.
Mr. Incredible goes to see his doctor, Doc Sunbright, who turns out to be Edna Mode's cousin.
Really?
So he looks...
like a small version.
No, he looks like a tiny Doc Brown.
Really?
Because he's got wild hair and big goggles and a giant bow tie.
That's awesome.
But he's the size and shape of Edna Mode. And he has a lab much
Bob,
like
it's about
hers.
your kids, Bob.
He's got a lab much like Edna's where he's got like a giant mallet to test your reflexes and things like that. And he runs all his tricks and he runs all of his tests. Bob has no powers. Well, Bob knew that.
Right.
But he can't figure out...
I hope he tested some other things before doing the giant mallet, because I feel like that could have gone badly.
That was the first thing we saw.
Oh, God.
But he not just that he has no powers, he seems perfectly normal. He seems so ordinary.
He's not, sick. He's not...
He's just healthy, just not superhuman. Jill and Helen are making cookies, but Helen's kind of distracted, or rather, she's not distracted. She's focused on what it is that makes Bob distracted. Jim and Bob are outside, and Jim challenges Bob to a game of basketball to cheer him up, and Bob's like, no, I can't. Actually, I can now. And they have a game of pickup basketball, and he loses, but just barely. Like, it's a close game, and he's sweaty and winded, and Dash is like, wow, you really sold it. And he's like, yeah, I really, you gotta sell it, son. Like, he's really sweaty.
That's awesome.
And Violet runs up and shows her phone to Bob. There's a disaster on Route 9. So they suit up, and they get out there. There's a school bus on the edge of a cliff,
Right.
and a whole bunch of boulders about to roll down onto it. And they're like, okay, Bob, go grab that big boulder. And like,
I feel like if you had like a superhero handbook of like scenarios you're going to run into, that's like the third page where it's like, of course there are kids on a bus. Of course there's things about to hit them.
Yeah. And they're like, okay, Bob, just go grab the big boulder and just hold on to it. And like, we'll clear the bus. And he's like, okay.
Oh, no.
So he's trying to hold on to it and it falls. And Violet just makes a ramp out of force fields. Like makes
cool.
a bunch of bubbles.
So her powers have
basically.
advanced since the movie.
She doesn't make a ramp. She just makes a bunch of force fields into basically into a ramp and like a bunch of bubbles. And he just like rides off it and then flies into the air. And Helen comes and grabs him. And she's like, okay, honey, what's up?
Right.
And he comes clean and they say, okay, well, you know, until you get yourself sorted out, you're a liability. So for now, you're grounded.
Ooh.
Issue 3 opens with Dash and Bart spying on their siblings, and Xander and Violet are totally kissing.
Aw.
Well, no, for them. Ew, gross!
Right.
I can't believe it!
Young teenage love.
Bob is going through his scrapbook of his old enemies, and he's wondering if maybe one of them is responsible. I just want to read you some of these enemies.
Yes, please read them.
Syndrome.
Of course.
We know.
Yeah.
The 12-gun kid. Radio X. And Helen sort of says, like, oh, I had good villains, too. And he's like, please, Organa, criminal mistress of chemistry? Please. Now, Razorilla, he was a threat.
Razorilla.
I know.
Love it.
But all of his villains are either in prison or otherwise accounted for, i.e. what happened to Syndrome at the end of
Right.
Incredibles. But Dash sees a news report of the monsters at the Three Pines Mall, and it's these monsters who look like they're men, but they have no faces, and they have hammers for hands.
What?
They're just these big, like, naked dudes in little Speedos with, like, just...
No faces, hammer hands.
Yeah.
So look, if you have no face, and you just wear a Speedo, and your hands are made of hammers, I can get why you're upset.
Yeah.
I can kind of get behind that.
And they're just trashing them all. Oh, I skipped over something. In the trophy room, when he's going through his scrapbook, Helen takes the de-evolution bomb. She's like, I thought I didn't want this in the house. And he's like, yeah, it's just a souvenir. And she's like, oh, I'm sorry, honey. This must be really hard for you to not be in the field now.
Right.
When these monsters attack, she says, you stay here, and they charge into battle. You stay here and take care of Jack at home. So he's doing the dishes, and he's vacuuming, and he's eating, because of course he's eating all the treats, all the cookies that she made with Jill, and they're just watching TV, and like while he's ironing, he's like trying to like backseat superhero, because the kids are not really responding to Helen the way they respond to him. Like,
Are they on like radio essentially?
No, he's just like watching the screen and be like,
oh,
no,
he's just like yelling at
do
it.
Do the thing with the thing and no, you gotta look for the angles or whatever. Like
Formation 12, Formation 12.
Because they don't really have a sync, you know, with Helen without Bob. Like he's part of their dynamic.
Right, he's part of it.
And he calls Helen to try to give her advice, and she's like, yeah, no, Helen, yeah, Bob, I know that they shrink when they multi. Oh, yeah, because every time you hit one of them, they split in two.
Oh, that's funny.
So, but he points out, he realizes every time they do, they're smaller. And she's like, yeah, no, I know, honey. Oh, hang on. And she hangs up, and he's like, yes, she got it. She figured it out. She figured out that you just have to hit them a whole bunch, and then they're a much more manageable size.
Right, then you can just like hurdle them into like a group.
A force field.
Ah.
You wrap them up in a force field, and they get really, really small. And then there's basically this globe full of these tiny little monsters.
With hammer hands and no faces.
And then Dash just runs up to it and holds out his hand over it and goes, "They are at my mercy!" And Helen's like, gloating, "It's for supervillains, Dash." Sorry.
That's great.
It's so great.
Thank you, Mark Waid.
But Bob and Helen talk on the phone, and he's like, yeah, you figured that out. Oh, you were great for figuring that out, and, you know, you did well with the kids. And she's like, yeah, but when you're here, it helps, and we're all good together. How's Jack? And Bob's like, yeah, Jack's been great. He's been well-behaved all day. In fact, he hasn't used his powers once all day long. Not a single... And he looks down at the cookie in Jack's hand.
Oh, no.
And he's like, oh, the treats. It's the snacks.
Bum, 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 bum.
He takes the cookies and the cakes that's left over to Doc Sunbright. He's like, oh, yep, nope, it's these. 100%.
Oh, my gosh.
So, like, there's no permanent damage, so you and your son, you know, if I can get some blood samples, I can whip up a quick anecdote. And Bob says, I have to get home. I don't have time. This was never about me. Meanwhile, at home, this is the end of issue 3, Helen and the kids are opening the door home, and those faceless monsters are just inside the door, waiting in the house.
Oh, my God. Issue
4 opens with Bob charging in costume. The house is wrecked, but no one's home. Then the floor explodes and the battle kind of tumbles back into the living room.
Oh, so they've been like fighting underneath.
They fought through the house into the basement and then back up into the main level.
Wow.
And they're fighting these big monsters. And these monsters have new powers. So one of them like makes an oil slick out of his hands, like Metamorpho style, that Dash
okay.
slips on. One of them shoots acid from its hand.
Oh, that's dangerous.
Yeah. So it jumps up a notch. And then Jill shows up, their neighbor, in her old costume, as Organa, Mistress of Chemical Malice.
Oh, God.
Because it's all about Helen. She is here for her long-awaited final revenge against her arch-nemesis, Mrs. Incredible, which she was Elastigirl pre-being in costume, but Elastigirl is copywritten by DC Comics. So,
Oh, okay.
which is why every piece of merchandise for The Incredibles has her as Mrs. Incredible and not Elastigirl.
Didn't know that.
Because she's a member of the Legion of Doom. Or no, the Doom Patrol, I'm sorry. She's a member of the Doom Patrol who can grow really tall.
I didn't know that at all. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
You know, Jill's basically been planning this ever since she made Parole. She knew the only way to get Helen was through her civilian identity as an unassuming neighbor. But unfortunately, Bob kept hogging all the food she brought over, so eventually she had to just make a more direct approach. So she made these monsters.
Wow.
These are basically walking chemical composites. They're mindless drones